All right, guys, welcome to episode 2 of HUSTL. I am so pumped for you guys to get to hear from my guest today, Brendan Lopes. He is the CEO of Multipli Tech, which is a tech agency that does custom software, custom app development. And I've seen him in a setting like this where we're talking one-to-one. I've also seen him speak on stages in front of thousands of people, and you guys are in for a treat. Brendan, thank you for being here, man.
Thanks, Nelson. This is an honor, and I know we're going to have a ton of fun. We've had some great combos over the year, so excited for today. Thank you,
I will
brother.
tell you guys, this is going to be difficult because not only is this someone I respect very highly from a business standpoint, he's also one of my best friends in life. So we may cut up a little bit. But,
yeah, 100%.
So Brendan, let's start here. I just highlighted kind of where you are now, kind of the dream scenario. I mean, founded a company. It's a tech company. It has, it's sexy. People like the sound of it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about 23-year-old Brendan.
Yep.
Where were you then?
Yeah, 23-year-old Brendan was probably beyond frustrated, Nelson. And it's because I'd done a lot of work. I was a couple years out of school. I had my MBA at the time. And I felt like I was in a job that I had to pump myself up to go to every day. It's funny looking back, you can put words to things that you couldn't put words to at the time. But when I look back now, 23-year-old Brendan was winning by broken scorecards. Mm-hmm. And I was suffering the consequences of that brokenness. I was $200,000 in debt. I was dating my now wife, trying to figure out how the heck I was going to convince her to marry me. Because of a lot of the internal frustration and just the balance sheet in life was not pretty. I remember our third date was at Zaxby's and she paid, Nelson, because I'd maxed out the credit cards on date number 2 getting sushi, pretending like I had it.
Yeah.
And, I knew I had gifts in me because I'd won in settings before. Former athlete, right? Grew up in a home where mom and dad told me I could change the world, believe that. Had some foundations for my faith and identity. But really, I was just a recovering frat boy trying to pick up the pieces and build the foundation for a future that mattered.
Yeah. When I met you guys, I remember, number one, I would have never known you were in the season that you were in. So I want to talk about that. But I remember vividly, I met you and your twin brother, Josh, and y'all had bought, I think it was your dinner, but did y'all buy, was it like day-old bread or week-old bread or something from Walmart? But I remember Josh and you like offering that to me, like, so, politely, like, hey, you want some bread? I knew that was the meal you were eating. And I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. You get creative when, you're trying to stretch money. And I just remember seasons where literally like our meal for the week was we would go and buy bread that has the sticker on it because it's questionable and possibly out of date. And you just make a whole loaf of peanut butter and jelly in advance for the week. Mm-hmm. And you just know, like, hey, this isn't a forever thing. This is a season thing. I'm making investments into my future. I think when we met you, Nelson, we were on the back end of our first startup that failed. And so financially, we were beyond tight. But yeah, like we'd grown up in a home where, what's ours is our guests, right? Like you host with what you have. And I think people see your heart way more than they see what you have.
Yeah.
Like people want to know that like you're just a giver by nature, and there's seasons where that's, hey, like have this bread, and there's seasons where it's like, let's go to the lake house, right? And let's go really do the thing. But it's part of the journey. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, because where I see people blow it real bad is either when they're at their lowest point or their highest point.
Yep.
And during your lowest point, again, I would have never known you were going through that. I found that out later. I mean, the bread was kind of a hint. But anyway, I feel like that didn't affect your identity. Mm-hmm. How did you not let that happen? Because as guys, let's get honest, our identity, at least for me, when you talk about broken scorecards, mine was tied to what did I shoot on the golf course that day? How many points did I score in the basketball game? That type of thing. So can you talk through that? Like kind of how your identity got you through that season?
It's a great question, Nelson. And I don't necessarily know that I knew I was doing this at the time. Certainly didn't get most things right in that season. But one thing I've seen and I try to encourage people in all the time is people don't just follow you for where you're at. They follow you for where you're going. And they want to be invited on the journey, not just a spectator in the journey.
Yeah.
And so I think there's so many people that they just want to pretend and create this false life on Instagram that looks like they have it. And they're frustrated when they don't. And they just feel like they're worthless because they compare themselves to other people's highlight reels. And that's a slippery slope. That's a really slippery slope. And I will say this, Nelson, like there were definitely a lot of dark days. There's days where there's high highs. There's days where there's low lows. But what I learned in that journey is like, even in the low lows, like the story that I had then was still like, it was life for someone that was praying to meet someone that was going somewhere. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe it's just the way we were raised. Maybe it was a little bit of our faith background, but like, I just truly believed that someday I was going to make it regardless of what my current circumstances were. And you're never going to attract the tribe that's going to help you get there. Just projecting like your current circumstances. So yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot though, that's what stood out.
So knowing that now, this is really cool. So our wives actually work together in the hospital.
Yes.
And so we met Marissa early on in that journey.
Yep.
When you're going through that, how important is it to have her in your corner? Like, because if like for me, if Steph's in my corner, the whole world can be against me and I'm good. But if I feel like something's off there, the whole world can be in favor of me and I'm done. Like, was she, how vital was she like in helping you get through that
Yeah,
season?
I mean, huge, beyond huge, right? Like when I reflect on my life, I always say that the big 3 decisions we make in life as a guy is 1, choose faith. That's just my belief. 2, choose your spouse wisely. And 3, choose where am I going to sell out and with who?
Yeah.
And if you don't get all 3 of those right, I just don't, I think you're severely limiting the potential that's in you from coming out. I mean, Marissa, having someone that had my back and believed in where I was going versus where I was at. I mean, I never had to worry about, does she love me for the money? Because it was not there. Right. And, I learned the power of vision and, we certainly don't have what we have today just because of me. Like, she's a hustler, and I learned what it meant in that season to choose a wife that's equally yoked, that brings something to the table, that can truly be a helpmate. And she's just an answered prayer. Like, she really is that, like, exceedingly abundantly above all that I could ask or imagine. I don't know why or how God gave her eyes to see that we were supposed to be together, but I'm grateful that he did, because she was great then and she's a great mama now. And it really is cool. It's awesome that our wives get to work together. We got to work together.
Yeah, we did.
Pretty unique.
We were terrible employees.
What's crazy is you were a great employee, right? You learned how to play golf 3 times a week and still crush your quota. I was trying to actually work, and anyways, it was a fun season.
So when did you get the bug for entrepreneurship? Was that something that you found early on, or was it through that frustration of corporate?
I think if you ask any entrepreneur, where did it start? They'll tell you a story of like, this business was birthed out of my frustration. I always say, I think at its core for myself, my twin brother, my younger brother, Corey, we grew up in a house where we were just super tight as brothers. And that's because of what mom and dad put in us. It's how they raised us. They were unbelievable parents. I watched dad work 6 days a week our whole life to have 1 day off. And I watched mom work 7 days a week our whole life to create the dream scenario to give us the foundation for our future. And when I say she worked 7 days a week, she stayed at home with us, right? But she invested into us at such a high level. Staying at home, I mean, sometimes that's more work than going to work.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, we see that firsthand now with
the
kids.
The ladies being home. But one of the things my dad taught me, he ran grocery stores and, he managed people. And then later in his career, he was able to take those people skills and get into sales. But for a long time, like, he was in a limited income setting, managing people that are very tough to manage. And we lived a good life because we had parents that loved us, but we didn't have like the financial dream. I mean, we were middle class, and we would take a vacation a year, and mom and dad would spend the rest of the year paying for it. And the thing that I respect about him, when I look back on childhood, I couldn't have told you how much money we made. We didn't live in the social media generation, so we didn't have a relative point. I remember laughter. I remember unbelievable memories. I remember like we were taught the importance of family. But I also remember we were taught the hustle. And our dad and mom both always told us, hey, you've learned, we've done our best to teach you the character, the work ethic. You get one last name, make it count.
Yeah.
But make sure that you find a place to apply that hustle that can create what you actually want.
I want to ask you something on that. So Brent and I were talking about in our last episode just about the hustle and the pressure of entrepreneurship. But ever since I've known you, you've had a pace about you, about the way you live your life, the way you can hear it. If you're listening to him now, you can hear the energy, you can hear his heart. It's coming out. But that pace, how important to that is or how much is that tied to where you want to go and having vision in your life? Because otherwise, like for me, I was just roaming or drifting in life until like I had, hey, this is what I want to do, and then your pace, that kind of guides your pace. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I think you owe it to yourself to discover your potential, because once you discover your potential, no one can ever take it from you. We've learned in life that like we don't negotiate our life based on what's in the bank. We negotiate our life based on what's in the ground and what we've learned is in us. And that's kind of back to the principles of seed and stewardship, which is really like what we base our whole life around, Nelson. We could go deep there, but I think, so many people in life, they try to build their life on, hey, I'm playing here, and I'm playing at this baseline, and maybe I'll just do a little bit more, and I'll be consistent with that. And that's fine, and it's better than nothing. But more often than not, like you're not doing enough now, and a little bit more still isn't enough. It's actually just enough to be frustrated. It's this whole concept that's been popularized by so many great books now of like 10x is actually easier than 2x. Like you owe it to yourself to have a season where you do live on PB&Js and you do work 20-hour days and you pull all-nighters to show up and knock that presentation out of the park or do the best with what's in front of you to discover what's in you. Because once you see things and once God shows you things and once people recognize things in you, you can't unsee them. Like once you go from here to here and you're playing at this max level, like that's unsustainable. Like you go there for 2 weeks, a month, and you go to bed exhausted every single night. You can't unsee like, maybe I don't want to have to go back there, but I can go back there. And then once you've done that and you adjust your baseline pace from like that max out level, now all of a sudden your baseline that you just set is way above that little bit more than where you're at now. And not only is it way above, it's easy because you were just playing at a level that was so much. So pace is huge. Like it's absolutely huge. We've had some great mentors in our life, Nelson, like shared, and a lot of our mentors have been shared mentors. And I could say the same thing about you. Like it's like watching what you and Steph have put together is it's a dream to not only watch your dreams come true, but to be winning with your best friends in life that are also accomplishing theirs. Like knowing that our kids are growing up next to other stud and studette kids raised by parents that have values that we believe in is everything. And it's not just a work thing, right? As you know, it's what that work leads to. We've had mentors tell us, if you're not where you want to be in life, it typically comes down to 3 things. It's 1, you're not doing enough work. And I think a lot of people stop there, right? But the other thing is maybe you're not doing the right type of work. So that's number 2, you're not doing the right type of work. And number 3 is you're not doing the right work with the right people. And all 3 of these, in my opinion, are equally important. And this is where I think if the podcast is hustle, there's so many people out there in today's world that they maybe are. They're like, man, like I feel like I've been hitting it at a pace, but I'm still not where I want to be. What's wrong with me? Well, maybe the answer is nothing. Maybe you're just trying to pedal harder, but you're stuck on a bicycle and you have a goal to go to Hawaii. And I hate to break it to you, a bike's not getting you there. You need a different vehicle, right? So sometimes like and this is where the value of one handshake, one connection, people that introduce you to a new vehicle where all of a sudden you apply that pace to the right setting with the right people, that's when the magic starts to happen because it becomes bigger than you and you step into a world of multiplication instead of a world of addition. So just core belief, the pace matters, but so does the place and so does the people, right?
I love it. All right. So if you're listening to this, obviously the podcast says hustle, and that means you want to grow, you want to get better in your life, and like you're hearing stuff just flow out of them. I got 2 questions on that. Like, there's a huge misconception in this world on balance.
Yeah.
And I know we have the same belief in this. Can you kind of share what that misconception is?
Yeah, I think, people talk about balance of like, well, if I do this, then I can't do this. And that's important. And I need a mental health day. And, if I do this, then I'm a bad dad. If I do this, then I can't be successful as an entrepreneur. And all of those things are important. I'm not bashing any of those. I just think it all comes from a mindset of lack.
Amen.
It's lack based. It's, hey, there's only 8 slices in a pie. And if I put 2 here, then there's only 6 left. And that's just not how I've chosen to see the world, because I've been taught to see it different. I think there's infinite slices in the pie. And when you take ownership of like, hey, it's not about limited resources. It's about stewardship and value alignment. Like I'm just as called to be a good husband as I am to be a good leader in business. I'm actually more called to do that. Right, like that's the number one way we show God's love to the world is through our marriage, right? And then I'm just as called to be a good dad as I am to run a successful company. Right. But how can I be a good dad if I don't show my kids what it looks like to win? Yeah. Right. And so like there's going to be weeks where being like living in alignment with my values is, hey, we're going to take a trip and I'm going to shut the phone off and be 100% present with my wife and kids. But the only reason you can do that is because, hey, there's also been seasons where it's like, hey, kids, like you're not going to see daddy for a little bit because there's a lot of people out there to help. And we're a family that's on a mission. It's not like, hey, dad, you're leaving to go work and go make money. It's Marissa says, hey, daddy's going to help people today. And that's the way we choose to see our whole life is we want our whole life to be an extension of our values. And I don't think there's enough people talking about this, Nelson. People don't slow down to speed up. Back to like pace, like it's an understanding of for what, right? Like what is the vision? What are we even trying to accomplish? Right? Why are you here? What gifts are in you that what are the things that only you can do in life, right? So I think it's just coming back to understanding there has to be an intensity. There has to be a focus. There has to be a mission and vision that drives these things. And then you need to evaluate the day-to-day through the lens of what are we here to do, right?
Yeah. And that's something too. Like when you're pacing at the level that we're talking about, you have a vision and stuff for your life, just know people are going to come at you. Like it comes with the territory. Right. But I think the thing with balance, like you hit it. People always look at balance of time. They never look at it from values. Right. Like I may be completely in line with my values, but maybe not a little out of balance with certain time things. But those, that's not your concern. That's mine. This is how I'm living in my life. Correct. The second thing I wanted to ask you, like with your story, it's one thing if you're really successful and you go 200,000 in the wrong direction. It's one thing when you're coming out of school and you're just getting your career started and that happens. It's very easy to play the victim card, I guess, when that happened. Yep. You never did. Your brother never did. And I'm curious, like, because I'm hearing stuff come out of you. How important was what you put in you in that season to get you through? Like we talk about the gates, like the eyes, the ears, and the mouth, like all the things that are going in you. Yep. Can you talk about that and how important that is throughout your whole journey, but especially if you're going through that season of, hey, I'm down, but I'm trying to go somewhere?
Sometimes the best place to be, Nelson, is, back up against the wall and nowhere else to go. But like, hey, I got to face this thing head on. I've also said that sometimes like when you feel like the only thing you have left is your faith, you realize that's the only thing you need. The best thing that ever happened to me was I fell hard enough, early enough to discover what was really in me. So many people, they're kidding themselves that they're winning because they're comparing themselves to their broke friends. You make 30 grand more than your peers. Who gives a crap? Yeah. Maybe we should edit that. Who gives a rip, right? Like who cares? Like, how is that a good indicator of success, right? Like, it's you versus you. Like, what are you capable of and where are you at relative to where you're supposed to be or what's in you, right? And thanks for saying that. There are definitely days like when you're alone in your thoughts, like I'd be lying if I didn't say I played the victim card. I think the toughest person to forgive in your life is yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you're $200,000 in debt, like the thoughts were, man, I totally misstepped. But I'll be honest with you, like the other thought was like, I'm $200,000 in debt and the whole world clapped for me the whole way. Because the reason for the debt is we started our first company that never cash flowed, and I got my grad school degree, and Marissa got a good degree. Mm-hmm. So isn't it crazy how, the people that don't even have what I want in life clap for me the whole way into what would normally be a hole that takes 20 to 30 years to dig out of. Mm-hmm. I think when people start seeing their current circumstances as an answer to someone's future prayer, it helps you start to realize, like, I'm not winning this battle just for me. I'm winning it for my unborn kids. I'm winning it to be the hero to my wife that I haven't met yet. And I'm also winning this story because you're most qualified in life to help the person that you used to be. Ed Milet said that at a recent conference that I went to, and I was like, man, you're most qualified in life to help the person you used to be. I know you've done this too, Nelson, because we had these stories at 23 years old, 24 years old. I used to think all the time of, all right, Nelson, flash forward 5 years from now. You're on stage in front of 10,000 people. What are you going to tell them? Mm-hmm. And what you're not going to tell them is a victim sob story of what woulda, coulda, shoulda happened in your life. What you're going to tell them is, hey, here's where I started, right? Here's what I learned. And like, this isn't a me story, right? It's a me story with a you meaning. Why do people tell their stories? Yeah, some people are egomaniacs, but successful people are not. They're the people that realize, like, I'm only sharing this stuff today because it's not about be impressed because I've beat this. It's, hey, I care enough about you to say, I believe in the gifts that are in you. Mm-hmm. And hopefully my story, when you're listening to it, you shouldn't be saying good for me, good for Brendan, good for his kids. You should be saying good for you. Mm-hmm. Because this is speaking right to people's spirits today. I know that it is, Nelson. And that's what activates the best in other people. And that's also what activates the best in you. We talk about this all the time. Like, you were an answered prayer in our life. Like, you showed up as a brother in a time that we desperately needed it. And every guy needs it. You're never going to become who you're called to be if you don't put yourself in settings with other people that put a demand on your gifts. Mm-hmm. And I just think that most corporate settings alone are never going to do that. So, a lot of context to the way we just answered it that, but like, it's got to be bigger than just, I'm not winning this battle to prove that I can have a certain amount of money. Like, the battle was not the $200,000 in debt. It was a thought process. It was an identity shift, right? It was an opportunity to create a win that would define the rest of our life, right? Mm-hmm.
Love it. How important, because you could easily have associated yourself with people that would have just wallowed with you in your pity. Yeah. But I think you chose to associate with people that would bring out the best in you. But how important is that one decision? Like, so many people just go to where they're comfortable instead of people that'll stretch you, because it's, we've talked a lot. It's a very popular buzzword, like mentorship. We talked about mentors and stuff that we had. Right. Most people don't want mentorship. They want agreement. They want people to agree with where they are. They don't want someone to say, hey, right, I love you where you are, but you're better than that, and you can get out of that. Right. So how important was that association for you?
Right. I mean, it was everything, Nelson, right? It really was. And like, the thing I'll say too is, people don't know about how much you know until they know about how much you care. Mm-hmm. So like, we had people come into our life that they cared first so that we actually had ears to hear what they said, right? Mm-hmm. And this, again, back to like, your test is what creates your testimony. We had a couple come into our life that we heard had paid off $250,000 in debt in a 3-year window in their 20s. And what's crazy is they were in their 40s at the time, maybe early 50s. When they were trying to figure out how to pay off the debt, they probably felt like there were days where they were swimming, mm-hmm. right? But what they didn't know is that the win they were creating was going to be the answered prayer for a couple guys 25 years later, mm-hmm. right? So they stepped into our life. They had the answers we were looking for. And the greatest gift they ever gave us was not a, here's what to do next. It's a vision.
Yep.
The first thing he ever said to me was, here's what I see in you that you can't see right now. Mm-hmm. Because vision is what creates discipline. like vision is what creates discipline. A man with no vision will perish. Vision is what creates discipline. It's not hard to stay disciplined. It's not hard to create pace. It's not hard to base your association. Everything in life is based on what are the stakes. Mm-hmm. What is it going to cost me, and what is it going to cost me to not do this? What's the opportunity? What is the vision that's driving this, right? Like if you challenge me to a pickup basketball game tonight, I'd bring my 5, you'd bring my 5, you'd bring your 5, you'd probably beat me, knowing your skills versus mine. And then, but someone would win and we'd smack talk until we played again, right? Mm-hmm. But if you said to me, hey, Brendan, we're playing a game of basketball 30 days from now and we're playing for $10,000, well, all of a sudden I'm bringing a totally different team and I'm not playing, right? I am now a motivational coach, right? Right. And I'm going to guys that played in college. I'm going to guys that played D1 and they're playing, right? Why? Because the stakes are higher. And I just think so many people, Nelson, they don't even look at their life as if there's stakes. Mm-hmm. And there are stakes, right? So who you put on that team, who you surround yourself with, whether you're up or you're down, is everything. The world does not care about how you feel today. The world cares about what can you do for me. And you don't have to feel high to change someone's life. So many people, they go around just looking for a high instead of looking for a place to give, right? Mm-hmm. And like typically I think we find our answers in giving to the people that are also searching for the answers that we already have for their problems, right?
I love that. And I feel like, too, if you're listening to this, there's a lot of people that want to be influencers. I hate that term in today's culture, but I get it.
Yeah.
But they don't want to be servers.
Right.
And there's a big difference. Like that's how you really influence people, is you serve. And that, I think that comes back to what entrepreneurship really is it is a vehicle to serve people. And that is the high that a lot of people don't realize. Right. You know, that when you get in that mode, you know, have you experienced, like, has your experience been the same along those lines?
Totally. Like you find things in you in serving other people that you never would have found without serving them, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just, there's nothing more fulfilling. Like, I don't think you look back on a year and say, man, this was a great year because here's where my 401k was when we started. Here's where it is now. Mm-hmm. Like that's one very one-dimensional metric of success, right? Mm-hmm. But what I look back on a year and say is like, man, how rich is our life? And like, how much peace do we have in knowing here's what we gave this year. Here's who we impacted this year, right? Here's people that made big decisions connected to their faith. Here's some marriages that we helped sow into that might not have made it otherwise, right? Yeah. And it's not because we're awesome. It's because we were taught to give, right? Mm-hmm. We were taught to serve, like you said. And so many people, they're just not used to that in the culture we live in. They think they got to read another book. They think they got to, and they just kind of numb the pain. Like they watch another Netflix series, they buy a new car, they buy a new house, they get a new girlfriend. They switch their marriage as if like their current spouse is the problem. No, the problem is you've got something in you that you're not allowing to come out, because the only way it's going to come out is when you serve. Yeah. It's when you give. It's when you put yourself in the right settings, right? So, yeah.
Love it, man.
Yeah, this is good.
This is good. Really good. I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit.
Okay.
Because I would do my audience an injustice if I didn't get a couple practical things from you. With you owning a tech company, you get to see the technology that's coming down the pipeline. Me being in marketing, I see it. I see what AI can do. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most valuable skill sets people can ever learn is how to share a story.
Yep.
Or if you want to put that under a broader umbrella, it's how to communicate like this. And if anyone's listening, like they can tell you are a very gifted communicator and storyteller. But I'm going to vent a little bit to you, then I'll let you take this where you want to go.
Cool.
But if someone's trying to get my business, I don't necessarily have to believe 100% in what you're doing. But I better believe that you believe in what you're doing.
Right.
And I feel like so many people, they've lost, or maybe they just never learned how to share their story with conviction and passion, with the mindset. And you had this mindset from the get-go of like, my story is helping someone who's where I used to be. But I want to give people some practical tips on how to talk with conviction and have belief and things like that, like you're doing, like you've done this whole time being here.
Right.
And we can talk about it however you want, one-to-one, one-to-many, because there's different settings when you're talking like this versus when you're talking to an audience. But if I asked you, how do you share a good story? Well, take that and run with it anywhere you want to go.
Okay, this is a fun one, Nelson. One of the greatest talks I ever heard about how to be an effective communicator came from Pete Vargas. And so I'm not going to steal his stuff without giving him credit. Pete is awesome. I went to a masterclass setting that he did about sharing your signature story, giving your signature talk, and the importance of that in life and in business. Mm-hmm. And he talks about what he calls the story braid framework. So the story braid framework. How do you tell a good story? It's these 4 components: heart, head, hands, heart.
Okay.
Heart, head, hands, heart. So start with heart. Like, how do you capture someone's attention, right? You start with heart. And again, I mentioned it earlier, it's a me story with a you meaning. If you had asked me about my story today, I wouldn't have shared it the same way if this podcast was called The Netflix or The Average Human, right? Or like The Failing Dad. Like, I'm sharing my story because I know there are people out there that are listening to this that are asking themselves, man, what's wrong with me? The world's telling me I'm just not appreciative of this job. I'm doing okay, but like there's that something more. Mm-hmm. Well, I started with heart where we were because you don't give a rip about where I'm at in life now. You don't care if Marissa retired at 27. You don't care if we have 3 happy kids. You don't care about anything in our life until you know that we care. And like it starts with connecting with people at a heart level, right? Once you have people's heart, then they'll listen to you. Mm-hmm. So then you move to, what am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to put into people? I think way too many people try to put too much into people in that. I've heard it said, like, focus on one thing versus 3 things versus 5 things. And if it's going to be 3 things, you better make it simple for them to remember the 3 things, right? So it's what is the story that I can tell that captures people's hearts to let them know that I care, to let them know that I'm real. Craig Groeschel, awesome pastor, awesome leader that I follow. He's got a podcast. He says that people would rather follow a leader that's always real than a leader that's always right. Heart stories show that you're real. So it's got to start with heart. Mm-hmm. Then it moves to head. Head is the content. Head is, most people, they're like, hey, I own a tech company and we do custom software and we do mobile apps, which is just like what you do. And it's like, there's important things we could talk about related to tech. There's important things we could talk about related to AI and trends. Mm-hmm. But quite honestly, no one cares about that if they don't know why you do what you do.
Right.
Right? Like the founder of this studio, Will, talks about the most important thing that you can do in your branding video to like to brand every company should have like a video. And most people in that video, they talk about their services. Mm-hmm. He said, you shouldn't talk about your services. You should talk about why you do what we do. Like, why did we start Multipli Tech? What is our mission and vision for the year? Well, we're going to add $100 million in value to the business owners we work with. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it matters how much money people make? Yes and no. Like, what I really want to do is give people time back. I want to help people that don't know tech, right? Use tech to do what tech can do so that they can do what only they can do. See, I believe that tech is one of the greatest ways to scale legacies. Mm-hmm. I think tech is one of the greatest ways to allow people to best steward their gifts and their time. Teams and tech. So I spent a huge part of my life focusing on how do I build elite teams, and then how do I build tech systems that can scale. Sometimes that's custom software. Sometimes it's how do I get existing software like on the market fit together to create the right system for scale. Why would I want to take 60 hours a week to do things that could be done in 15? Why would I need 50 people at my company to do what 5 should be able to do? Mm-hmm. And like, if it costs you $1 million to create $5 million in value, that's a no-brainer. And that's what I love about this space. It's like a puzzle. Every time we talk to a client, I get to hear their story. I get to hear not just what they do as a business, but why do they do it? And when you get to work with mission-focused entrepreneurs that actually have a purpose beyond their life rather than like, hey, I make XYZ widget so that I can make a bunch of money and drive a fancy car. That is such a rewarding thing. So it's heart, right? Then it's hands. Then it heart, head, then it's hands. This is the call to action piece, right? This is where like, what do I want people to do? And this can be different based on the setting, right? And then it moves back to heart. So like the call to action might be like, hey guys, like if you're hearing this story today, I want you to focus on like the one takeaway is suspend all disbelief for the next hour and put yourself in a state where you ask yourself, you're on stage in front of 10,000 people 5 years from now. What are you going to tell them? Write that story. And if it doesn't make you laugh and it doesn't make you cry, you're missing what's already in you. Maybe that's the one action item, right? Maybe the one action item is ask yourself the question, am I in a setting that can get me where I want to go? Am I the guy that's just pedaling harder on the bicycle? Or do I need to upgrade my vehicle? Not to go from a bike to a Harley, but to go from how do I put myself on a plane riding shotgun next to a pilot that already knows how to fly?
Yep.
Maybe that's the takeaway. Maybe the takeaway is, hey, I think you need to upgrade your association. You need to cut some people out of your life and find new people to enter into your life. It could be any of those things. But again, it's heart, head, hands, and then heart. Right?
So let me ask you this, because, and I may do a little marketing plug here. Some people, they may not be on stages like you, but here's where they miss it. Every time they post something on social, it's one to many. Multiple people are going to see that. So there's a way you can share your story with heart. Like someone they may say, oh, I'm an HVAC company. I don't do anything. But there's part of your heart that's in that company, and people need to know what that is.
Right.
They need to know why. Maybe you started learning the trade from your grandfather, and that was the way you started spending time with him when you were 6.
Correct.
And then you came into the family business. Like that stuff matters to us.
Totally matters.
Like you'll find this funny. You've met a lot of people that are financial advisors, right? There's a lot of them. And I remember I met one guy. I was playing basketball, and we just in conversation asked what each other did. And he asked me, he said, you and your wife ever stay up at night and think about when the kids are gone, what type of life you want to live? And I said, all the time, like every night. And he goes, I make sure that happens. He had my attention.
Wow.
What everyone else told me would have just said, I'm a financial advisor, but that's like how you do it. He told me what he did, like the outcome that he helped produce. And so
good.
The story can be, it doesn't have to be on a stage. It can be one-to-one. It could be on social media, but how you frame this stuff really matters, because that's what, AI can do all the logic, but it can't connect heart to heart with a human.
Correct.
And do you feel like, or I guess, is that a gap that you see that people are missing? Is that heart-to-heart connection in that?
100%. 100%. And this is where I've loved getting the chance to work with C3 and everything you're doing at a marketing level too. If you're talking about tech without marketing, you're just wasting you're wasting your time. Right? Because so many people they want to develop websites, they want to establish new product lines. They want to focus on the next widget instead of the next story, right? Stories is what people buy. It's what the stories sell.
Yeah.
Right? Facts tell, stories sell, sales 101. But again, I don't say that to teach people how to sell in terms of manipulate people. It's like, how do you authentically connect with people?
Yep.
Right? There's, you were just here with Brent earlier. Well, guess what? There's tons of dentists in town. Right? But so what am I really buying? Buying a level of service. I'm buying a way people make me feel. I'm buying stories of people that I feel like I can connect with, right? There's tons of marketing agencies out there. It's tons of production places, right? But what Gronk's doing today is they're literally creating an atmosphere that pulls the best out of business leaders in the most efficient amount of time. And that's what's so cool. That's what people will pay a premium for. That's where people will be like, man, you make me like me better, and you attract an audience that helps me. You're helping me tell my story in a way that does grow my business because it connects with my target audience, right? So,
because if you go through that, what you guys went through in your story, and survive past it. I mean, surviving is one, and then thriving is kind of step two.
Right.
But if you can't tell that story in a way that connects with people, what's the purpose?
Yep. That at that point, it's completely ineffective, right? You're missing one of your greatest gifts, which is your testimony.
Yep.
And you can use that to help take things so many different directions, right? You can use it to grow a brand. You can use it to grow a business. You can use it to grow the person in front of you in a one-to-one conversation and let them know, like, hey, there's more in you. Let me tell you a story that can help activate that. It's everything, right? And
all right, let me ask you this. If I'm a 23-year-old, maybe where you were when we first met, and I'm listening to this and I'm saying, I can never communicate like Brendan does. Like, I feel like I could give you a topic, throw you on a stage in front of 10,000 people and give you about 30 seconds notice, and you could run with it for 30 minutes. I think part of that is a gift and a steward, but part of that is learned. What advice would you give people that say, hey, I want to be a better communicator? Maybe I can't go to, a 9 just yet, but maybe I can get from a 3 to a 5. Yep. Is there any practical tips you would give them?
100%. I think people need to focus on what are your core stories that have defined your life today. I really believe that everyone's got, this sounds cheesy, but everyone's got a song inside of them. Most people just aren't singing it. And, your core life message, Nelson, might not be the same as mine.
Right.
But the world doesn't need another Nelson, right? The world needs another you, right? Like the world needs your story because you're most qualified in life to help the person you used to be, right? So I think people need to focus on what are the stories? Like, what are the stories that people would connect with from your life? Like, I'm thinking all the time, I literally have notes on my phone where when our kids do funny things, like, I'll write the story down because I'm like, if I do get on stage and get a 30-second notice, whether that stage is a group of 5 guys, whether it's 10 couples, whether it's like, hey, the pastor doesn't show up to church this week, someone's got to take the mic, whether it's we're doing a podcast, like, I practice those stories. And that sounds crazy. It's not because I have an agenda behind them. It's because that's where your core message comes from. Like, most of these stories we've shared today, you've heard me share countless times already, right? It's just packaging them together for the existing audience, knowing your audience and knowing what's going to move people. But it starts with, like, continue to write stories that matter, which is part of, like, choosing what you're going to do with how do you define a win in a year? Well, it's you got to create mini adventures. You got to create a life that is exciting, that people want to be a part of. You got to invite people onto the journey. Do things that are fun. Do things that are interesting, right? I think sometimes people get so narrow-minded that they just go into a tunnel and they lose the connectivity of, man, I do need stories that pull people with me. But I also think that tons of people, they don't even know what are the core stories, what are the areas we've already won, what are the battles that we've overcome that can move people right now. Most people just don't give themselves enough credit for what they already have.
Love it.
Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now in the world of entrepreneurship? If I'm starting in the world of entrepreneurship, what's the number one bit of advice you'd give me?
Go for it sooner.
Okay.
Totally.
Why is that?
Go for it sooner. Because if you don't own it, again, we're talking to a crowd that's listening to a podcast called HUSTL, right? So I'm not out there trying to, pee in someone's cornflakes that loves their job. Like, seriously, I'm not, like, there's plenty of people that love what they do in their job and they feel like it's utilizing their gifts and it gives them energy every single day. Awesome. That is phenomenal, right? And I'm excited to have people like that at the companies that we own, where we're doing them a service, putting them in their gifts, and they're doing us a service, and we're creating shared value. But if you're in that position where you feel like a little piece of you is dying every day to just barely make ends meet and finance one vacation a year and live the rest of your life through Instagram, like, you owe it to yourself to go for it. And I think way too many people, Nelson, they get complacent, right? They think they have this number in their mind of what is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, right? They have this
print it every day.
Yeah, totally. They're thinking too small, and they're giving way too much control to people on how their kids are going to grow up. Like even people that are quote unquote making it, Nelson, you've seen it all the time. Happens all the time in the world of sales, right? People are one email away from a totally different future because the comp plan changed, or a company gets acquired, or a company goes out of business. And all of a sudden what you thought you were building for a 5-year window, a 10-year window, whatever it was, right? You weren't building. You were building for someone else. And so, at 35 years old with 3 kids, you're about to have 4, right? I think you're a little older than 35. The stakes are much higher than they were at 23. Mm-hmm. It would have been a lot easier to replace my income then than it is to replace my income now. Yeah, right. So I just think
if you got less than no money,
yeah, totally.
It's easy.
Yeah, it's easy. So it's just the sooner you can start, the better. And don't take this out of context. I'm not telling people to go quit their job tomorrow and say, hey, I know what I don't want. Mm-hmm. So that's a solution to have what I do. That's not true. Knowing what you don't want is a starting point for change.
No, and the reason I ask you that, because there are people, I'm sure, that already own something. They look for practical skills, and they're going to learn how to communicate better just by listening to you, and that you write down your stories and that you practice. Yep. But there's other people that were like me 2 years ago, where it was you felt that hum where it's like, I'm supposed to be not here. I'm supposed to be doing something else, to have a vision, to have an idea. Right. And I think people miscategorize risk. They think money is risk. Like, that's all relative. It's the easiest problem to fix.
Correct.
It's way easier than a health problem, than a marriage problem, things like that. Right. But Brendan, this has been awesome having you. And I knew you were going to be good at it, or you're going to be this good. So thank you. If you could summarize this, and if you wanted someone to have one takeaway from our conversation, what would that be?
Well, thanks for having me, Nelson. And, follow-up thought to what you just said. I remember the conversation we had over breakfast a year and a half ago when you were talking about going for it. And I had seen what a gifted communicator you were. And not only you're a gifted communicator, you're phenomenal when it comes to marketing, you're also phenomenal at connecting people, building authentic relationships. So when you started talking about starting C3 and creating a brokerage of all the best talent across Greenville, the Southeast, and the country, and then being the connector of people to the talent they need to move their business forward, I knew right away, like, this is it. This is his sweet spot. And then I watched you go for, the next year and a half, 2 years, and I watched you start to succeed. And Nell, it just gave me so much courage seeing you win. I see people think about, what could this cost me if I fail? Mm-hmm. Well, the flip side is, what's it going to cost you to die with that dream inside of you? Like, what could you gain? Mm-hmm. Right? And I've seen, God bless what you're doing because you have the right heart behind it. And you've built skills that have put you in a position to do what you're doing. So my encouragement for people would be man, your courage is going to inspire people that you don't even know are watching, right? Because I saw that and I was like, hey, it's time, Marissa. We're ready to do this. And that could be at any level, by the way. I remember when you guys first had Charlotte, your oldest daughter. We didn't have kids yet. And that inspired me, watching the way that you guys stepped into parenthood. Hey, we can do this. We can be great parents. I remember the day you got married, being there at your wedding. Man, I can do it. I don't have to have everything figured out, right? We're just going to create an environment. We'll figure this out along the way. So what do I want to leave people with? Your story matters. Practice your story. Practice your communication skills. And know that telling your story and continuing to write your story, you hold the pen to your own future. Write that story of what your life's going to sound like 5 years from now, because no one's going to write it better than you. And if you don't like what you can see right now, put yourself around people that can see that next level and create a vision that creates the discipline for you to go live a tomorrow that you're proud of, right? You're going to inspire a lot of people along the way, just like you guys have done. And it'll allow you to thrive in business, thrive in life. And I think that's what we're talking about, is how do I live a life in alignment with my values, where I have peace and joy and can be a blessing to other people, not just my wife and kids. So,
love it. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Nelson. This was great.